In this lecture, we will talk about the client and the server network programming by using Java examples. We will first talk about the server. For the client-server network programming, we needed to import the Java.NET and the Java.io packages. The server should always listen at the port, so the client can connect to the server. The server usually uses a well-known port. For example, web server takes port 80 and FTP takes port 21. For a user-created server, it should take a port number higher than 1023. Another important component for server is the listener. In Java, the listener is actually a server socket. We can create a server socket by calling the server socket constructor with the port number as the single parameter. There are, of course, other server socket constructors. So the listener will just listen at the specified port and wait for client request for connection. Whenever the request is legitimate, then the server listener will process the request. As the code shown here, the server will accept such request and actually establish a communication link with client by creating a server socket, at a port other than the server port. Please remember that this socket is used for client-server communication, and it does not use a server port. It will use a system-generated port in a certain range. The handle connection method defines the communication logic between the server and the client. It will first call the get input string to get the byte string communication link, which can provide byte-to-byte I/O between two entities. Then we pass it as a parameter to input string reader to create a input string reader object by calling the input string reader constructor, which is essentially character string and provide character by character I/O between two entities. To allow text communication between client and server, we need to create a buffered reader by calling the buffered reader constructor, which take a input string reader object as the parameter. The outgoing communication is done by printer writer. It is created by calling its constructor with the output string object associated with the socket. Okay. Please note that the internet address is the remote site IP address. In this case, it is the client IP address. That's pretty much about the server-side network programming. Now we were talking about the client-side network programming. The client is similar to a regular Java class, with the only exception it needs to create a socket to connect to this server. By creating a socket to connect and communicate with the server. The client can create a socket by calling the socket constructor with a well-known port and well-known host name, the server IP or the server host name, and a well-known port number where the server is listening. Please note that the exception may be thrown as the request could be denied because of many different reasons, including no such servers running on the port, the machine is down, firewall denied or ignored. Once the request is granted, a socket connection is established. The communication between the client and server is handled by the handle connection method. The only thing different is that the client should be the first. The only thing different is the client should be the first to send the message out to the server and then read. As shown here. We need to make sure that there will be one entity send out the message first, otherwise both of them will wait for each other. So let's run the program and check the result. This is client-side message console, and this is Let's talk a little bit more about this advanced server-client network programming that allows object to be communicated over the network. So this is the server side. We will take a look at the handle connection. So the listener would be the listener at the server side, and the connection request at the client side is almost the same as the text communication in our previous example. The actual communication between client and server with the object transfer over the network will be handled in the network handle connection object method, which communicate with the object input string and object output string instead of the buffer reader and the print writer. In the handle connection object method at the server side, we will first create a output string which allows byte-to-byte communication, and then create a buffered output string which allows buffered communication between two entities. Finally, an an object, output string object will be created based upon a buffered output string object. Similarly, an object input string object will be created based upon a buffered input string. The client will simply create an object inside the handle connection object, okay? And send the job to the server over the network by passing this job object to the object output string and flush just in case the buffer is not full. The server will try to read the object sent from the client and then put it into the job queue. And then it will process this job object and print out the operations inside the job. So that's pretty much about the advanced network programming that allows object to be communicated over the network.